Hey, welcome to InfluenceNow Live. This is our fourth live telecast, and I want to welcome a special guest today. Actually, before I get to that, sorry, I jumped ahead. Before I get to that, I want to make sure you all follow us, InfluenceNow, follow our YouTube feed, follow our YouTube channel, subscribe. It helps us go a long way. We just switched format onto this channel, so we need to build this up a little bit. So your help is welcome. And today we're going to talk PR with co-founder of Cast Influence, which is also my company. So I'm really happy to have Lea Taylor on, and her and I are going to go back and forth on some of the PR initiatives and things we've seen in this environment with COVID-19, and we are looking forward to answering your questions as well. Please put your questions in the chat window if you have them in real time. I'll try to pull those in as they're relevant and as much as I can. And we'll go ahead and tackle those as they become available. So without further ado, let me add you to this channel, Lea. Welcome, Lea. And hang on, there's going to be some applause for you.
Okay.
Okay. So welcome to the channel. Okay, so that always gets a laugh, right? If you want to maybe do a little more thorough introduction of yourself than I just gave you, and then we'll dive into some of these questions that I've seen from the community.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here, and thank you for having me. My name is Lea Taylor. I'm head of communications, as Justin said, for Cast Influence, but have about a 20-year career in public relations, media relations, analyst relations, events, speaking awards, you name it. I started my career actually a long time ago working at an agency called A&R Partners, which eventually was acquired by Edelman. Also worked at Outcast, the Outcast agency, supporting clients like NVIDIA, Jawbone, CA, and then eventually I had moved on to working in-house with brands like Bandsintown and InVision before consulting full-time with Cast Influence. So happy to answer anyone's questions about public relations or anything that I've come across in the last 20 years.
Fantastic. And I think, and again, because this is a live telecast, we realize some people can't make the live telecast, but if you have questions after this telecast, I think it's important to note this too. Put them in the comments. We'll go back to them. We'll answer your questions. We'll put any material that we discussed today also in that, in the comments area. So, or if you're just listening, just find us on our website or find us via the YouTube channel, and we'll go ahead and answer those questions. So I'm going to dive right in because the world of PR has changed drastically since beginning of March. We were doing a lot of proactive outreach as a company. We were doing a lot of funding announcements. We were doing a lot of things around brand activation, sometimes experiences, speaking events, right? A lot of this has changed massively at this point. I think it's important to maybe dive into the changes that have happened, Lea, but also, what are the changes you've seen? How have you seen the changes? And then also, why public relations, why communications is so vital right now?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's funny, as you're asking that question, all I can think about is the profession of public relations itself is always changing. COVID-19 just happens to be the most recent and relevant and impactful. But I mean, when I started my career, it was putting clipbooks into a binder and trying to figure out who the reporters were at various publications, because we didn't have media databases and everything was in, actual binders and spreadsheets. Nowadays, everything is digital, everything is online, everything is real time. It happens so fast. The news is so fast. And I think now with COVID-19, it's accelerated even more for not just brands, but the media function itself. I mean, I've talked to reporters on a daily basis, and they're constantly telling me that, a reporter who was covering, smart devices or healthcare has now been pulled on the COVID beat and applying their coverage to how are companies and healthcare workers responding. Companies that ultimately weren't set up to go remote are either forcing their company or their team to work from home, or they're having to pivot and come up with a new strategy, a new business model to be able to be relevant to their customers today. So it's affected everybody in way, shape, or form. And I think public relations being on the front line of how you communicate with just not just your internal communications team, but also with your customers and the world around you. It's become a super important function. So things have been pretty busy lately.
Yeah, and I think diving into some of that a little bit, I know I read a Reuters article pretty recently about the number of users actually during the COVID-19 or the coronavirus era has just substantially increased. I mean, we can all probably attest to this. I looked at my news tab seriously probably once a week before, and now I look at it probably 5 or 6 times a day. And I'm looking for, as business owners, we're looking for news related to how are things changing, what is the government passing, what is happening around us that is directly impacting our businesses, directly impacting our lives. All of those things have become so vital. So I think this messaging and looking at PR as your a train for your messaging is so vitally important to your business sustaining itself. Brings us into your message and your brand. I believe, and I know we've had these discussions before, that your brand and your message is everything right now, because it just might not be possible to reach the level of sales that you were at before. If you're a restaurant owner, you are not going to reach the sales you were at before by just doing takeout. What is it that you can do and develop in a narrative that will help you promote what you can do to help right now and also keep yourself relevant as a company? And there's a very fine line to that, because it is all about a messaging strategy and a narrative, sometimes a business pivot that we can probably have a whole nother show on, is business pivot, making this really a vital topic. I know I said vital a lot today. I don't know what's wrong with me. I think it's the word of the day. But what can you maybe tell us about understanding how somebody should develop this message right now? What is it that we give examples too, if you want, some of the clients we've worked with and how they've developed message and how they've really in a sincere way wanted to help the community, but at the same time also helping their brand.
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, like a company, a brand, there is no PR unless you have messaging. Messaging always comes first. This is so crucial. This is so important. I really wish everyone would invest the time and the dedication into their messaging, because that basically becomes the narrative that you tell your team, you tell everyone. It rolls out and it's consistent and it's repeatable. So for specific examples of why that's important, I could talk about GoCheetah, which is a really cool company based out of the Bay Area. And what they were doing prior to COVID was B2B wholesale food and delivery. And so they were selling wholesale products and services and supplies, food, dairy, even just takeout boxes to restaurants. And overnight, they saw the majority of their business dry up because restaurants had to close. So what did they do? They pivot, more so they expanded. They still sell to restaurants, but now they've actually started selling direct to consumer. So anyone can download the app, not just restaurants, and order supplies in bulk. You can get flour, you can get cheese, you can get milk, you can even get toilet paper. And it took not just, I think, development focus, because they had to redo the app and push to the app stores so that it was consumer facing. But they also had to come up with a brand new marketing strategy. Who is GoCheetah now? Because they're not just B2B wholesale delivery for restaurants. That doesn't resonate with consumers. They now need to come up with a different narrative of who they are on their website. So that was one whole marketing strategy angle that we discussed with them. Their go-to-market. How do they actually explain to consumers what GoCheetah is? How do people find GoCheetah? What are the keywords we need to optimize for? How are we preparing the spokespeople, like the CEO and the co-founder, to get on Cheddar Broadcast and San Francisco Business Times? What are they telling these reporters about who GoCheetah is today? So all of that basically stems from messaging. And I think that's the perfect example of why it's so important. And I give kudos to GoCheetah and Naama Moran, the CEO there, because within 1 week, she was able to change the entire focus of their company to be more dedicated toward this consumer aspect, which ultimately I think is what has saved their business.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something too. Yes, they've switched to direct to consumer, but they've also kept their B2B model in place. And from what we're seeing on the statistical information on the back, I don't want to dive too much into that because it's proprietary. But what we're seeing is an increase in both the D2C market and the B2B market at this point. And that is because of the public relations strategies they've put into place a lot, also how the business pivot has worked, and also just the general message and narrative between the marketing team and how PR and marketing are working together to create really something that is not only focused on B2B and restaurants still, but also something that shows you can buy these products and make it a touchless experience and safety and everything else that we're concerned about right now on a direct-to-consumer way that just grocery stores are not able to do right now. And that's been extremely effective for them and something that I think other companies can take a lot from.
Right. And I think it's important to note, too, that prior to Cast Influence coming on board with Cheetah, they really had not done a lot of proactive PR before. So restaurants knew who they were, and obviously word of mouth, and they had done a little bit of marketing, and of course they had an app developed and a website. But this COVID-19 pandemic and the closure of restaurants and their story is so unique and timely. So I don't want folks listening to take that lightly, that they weren't taking advantage of a disaster. They ultimately just had a very compelling story to share. And I think the fact that we went out with empathy and altruism, and I can say honestly that Cheetah really is not, they're not taking a monthly subscription fee from the restaurants. They've really done a lot for charity and nonprofits. They're donating excess food and supplies that otherwise would get thrown away into the garbage to homeless shelters and to people that really need access to all of these, all of this food. The food supply is a very important topic right now in the news, especially as food and meat plants are now starting to close down. There's been a lot of panic, I think, and worry of where we're going to get our groceries going forward. So I do think that Cheetah is a very unique company and a very unique time that they really just had a lot to share. And by bringing on PR, we were able to be that megaphone to tell the world who they are, what they're doing. And the press really, I think we're looking for a story like that. You had said earlier that you look at the news 5 times a day. I'm sure people are looking at it much more than that. You're getting notifications from CNN, and you're getting email alerts and Facebook and Instagram and text messaging and Zoom calls. I mean, Zoom fatigue is a real thing that I think press are really looking for positive stories and ways that companies are actually trying to help. So it's nice to be able to give press that angle versus, constantly looking at rising death rates and charts and graphs that shows this, scary upward trajectory.
So not everyone can clearly pivot the way Cheetah did. So I think you're going to have a lot of people that listen to this or watch this that are like, okay, that's great. That company kind of had a built-in thing. It actually wasn't built in because they really had to think about how to do it. And that's what I want to get across here. I think companies have to think about how their message from a marketing perspective is going to be perceived and look at the trends in real time and the trending that's happening to develop the storylines in a very sincere way. I can't say that enough. You have to really mean it. People are going to see right through you if you don't mean it. I've seen a couple commercials recently that I just roll my eyes because I'm like, they don't really mean it. And yes, you can do self-preservation and mean it at the same time. And I think Cheetah has done a really good job of that. They also did these stories. They didn't even think, they did these restaurant stories that they didn't even tell us about when we first interacted with them. And, we were like, oh my God, we got to make this bigger because these are helping restaurants get a voice out there. And lo and behold, within the restaurant industry and the B2B side of media, that has taken hold and has been an effective avenue for them. They didn't even think about that way. They were sincerely just doing this because they felt like it was a great opportunity to showcase what restaurants are going through. And that's what they thought about at their core. And that's what I want to get across for a lot of the companies out there that might be listening or watching this. We have a question related to this, Lee. I'm going to pull it into the broadcast. So, how to stay on top of what is trending and the news direction. So maybe you can get into a little bit. I have some answers to this. I actually thought about this question before we even got on today. I have an overlay of some trending topics that I can just show a graph of. But tell us about your process, maybe a process that people can use in order to find trends, figure out what the next trend is going to be, anticipating and developing those storylines out of that.
Yeah, I think for anyone listening too, it's important to know who your beat reporters are. And if you don't understand what that means, set up a Google alert. There's another tool out there called TalkWalker. They're free. You can put in keywords like the name of your company plus what it does. So SaaS plus enterprise, or design plus thinking, or Cheetah plus delivery. You're going to every single day get an email that's going to show you all the different articles that have been written on those particular keywords. And that's a way for you to actually go through. It does take a lot of manual curation, but over time, or if you have a PR team, they'll start to develop what we call like our beat reporter list. Here's the people who are covering this space. They may or may not know about you. They're definitely writing about your competitors, and they should be writing about you. So these are the folks that your team or you individually could be reaching out to say, hey, we have a timely story to share, and here's what it is. Or the best approach, I think, to get in touch with press, especially right now, is to make yourself a resource. Time and time again, I've tried to push back on clients that are trying to force a story or push their own agenda, and I definitely don't advocate for it and don't recommend that, because if you're a resource for media in a time of a crisis, or you have ultimate deadlines and all kinds of people that are asking for your attention, you really want to be a helpful resource for them, and press remember that. So I think by extending a hand of, hey, Chorus, for example, is a local company here in Denver. They do data analytics and data insights based on real-time feedback from real people. Reaching out to press and saying, I'm happy to run a report for you to figure out what are people doing in response to new work from home regulations, or the new topic that's come up is, how do I reopen my business and do it safely? I think a lot of people are scared right now on, I don't want to cause an infection. I don't want my team to get sick. I don't want my customers to get sick. So that's a timely topic that companies, I think like Chorus, for example, could do some research on for free for publication and say, here's some data, attribute it to us, feel free to run it. And that ultimately will be something I think a reporter will remember and come back to you again and again. I think in the case of Mural, another company that we consult for, they have a visual collaboration platform. They make a digital whiteboard. It's gotten so much attention in the last couple of months, and specifically just this week, the founders published a blog post that was talking about how they've seen new user increase by, or user activity overall, by 15 times. And that's week over week. Like, millions of people are coming to Mural and looking for a way to collaborate. So how can they be helpful to press or even just to customers? It's not so much about, this is great for us and we're doing really well. They actually opened up their trial period from 30 days to 90 days because they realized a lot of people need this right now, and it's not a time to be trying to profit. It's more a time trying to be a resource and be helpful. And that ultimately is a PR story I think that press would want to hear about. And they're not the only ones. Like Zoom is another tool, the video conferencing tool that we've all you either love it or hate it because you're on it all day, or you're using it to stay connected with your family. But it's gone through their ups and their downs with security breaches and things like that. But they've adjusted their pricing structure to go from, I think, what was it, $150 to $15. So it's much more affordable, and that's a great strategy because, again, they're getting so much traffic coming in. It's better to actually be helpful for people and make a little profit than say no to people that really need you and try to just, advertise to companies that can afford you.
I'm gonna correct you on the Zoom pricing. We should say we don't know what their pricing was to what it is. I have said my own experience with it is we did rooms before, and I'm not sure how their pricing structure may have changed or is different. But I think if you get over 10 people on your team or something, there might be a cost savings. But we're not an expert on that, so I don't want that to be put out there as fact. We don't know what Zoom's pricing structure was to what it is. Having said that, though, there is a lot of companies out there that are trying, like you said, like Mural and others. There's a lot of companies out there that are doing like a lot of extra things for people right now, whether it's more tutorials, more classes, more certifications that they're just throwing in as part of their packaging, free months up front, Obviously, they're looking at the long range of things, and they're thinking about, okay, in 3 months and 6 months when this is over, I'll put in quotation marks, I don't know if that will be the case, but they're looking ahead to when are people going to actually be able to pay for their solution again too. But they're willing to take a loss leader, and a loss leader is not a bad thing. A loss leader has been a thing in marketing since I can remember and since I've been in marketing. So not a horrible thing to have a loss leader as long as your pricing mechanisms are in place for after that happens. And everyone right now, I think, fully expects there to be a cost involved when this is quote unquote over. So, right now is probably the best time to do some kind of loss leader program because people fully expect you to want to charge for something at the end of this. And that's a personal opinion there, but it's also something I think from a psychological standpoint is very real.
And that's,
go ahead.
That's actually an interesting strategy that we've heard from some small business owners is that as the reopen across the country is starting to take place this week and next week, how do I bring customers back? How do I tell people I exist? How do I make people feel safe? There's even, I'm sure, some businesses that are just now starting to open for the first time. How do you market and brand yourself in an environment where you've never existed before? So again, I think those freebies, give to get, if you try to entice customers in through coupons and discounts and free trials, anything you can do to really build that trust with customers, I think will go a long way.
Yeah. I have another question from actually before we got online today, and I'm going to jump subjects just a little bit from the trending and the narrative. Clearly, we can have a huge, deep discussion around every particular business around narrative and what's trending. I will say one other additional thing before we move on. Reopening, for example, as a trending word, has 494,700 articles written about it since about the beginning of March. So that's data pulled from our database. That is a huge amount of articles. So clearly, if you can be in front of reopening and how reopening is happening, and again, why you pay attention to media and look at it as a business owner and understanding where people are going and why they're going that direction will help you in how you pivot and help you how you market going forward. So I definitely wanted to throw that out there as a stat that we're seeing. So where should you focus your messaging efforts? This is the question I want to. Where should you focus your messaging efforts? Is it digital marketing versus PR, or what within the digital marketing versus PR is probably most appropriate right now? I have my own thoughts on this. I just wrote an article on this for Colorado Biz Magazine. Yeah. But what do you think about this, Leah? Where do you feel like PR is in the priority of things versus digital marketing, and where should they be played against each other?
They definitely go hand in hand, but they're completely separate. And I think a lot of times people will lump public relations in with marketing and think it's the same exact thing, and it's within that marketing department. PR and marketing tend to work as colleagues and collaborators, but marketing is much more of a sales tactic, and PR is brand awareness, thought leadership. So that's an important distinction. And I think right now they're both incredibly important because with digital marketing, that includes what you're putting out there on your social media channels. I know a lot of clients had to pivot very quickly from, they might have one day been saying, buy one, get one free, or we're leading this webinar next week on XYZ topic. That all needs to be scrapped. That all needs to be put on the shelf or put on pause, because now you need to actually focus all your digital marketing and your copy and your strategy on how am I reacting to COVID-19, or what are my new strategies for success. We're seeing a ton of articles about how to go suddenly remote or working remote best practices. We've all seen the funny, listicle articles on the Zoom bombs and things that happen when your kids walk in on your calls, your dog's in the background. Those are all the things that are trending right now. So you have to be very sensitive to that, I think, with your digital marketing strategy. And I know, Justin, you're much more of an expert on that than I am, but from a PR perspective, it's given me a lot more storylines to pursue and ultimately to craft some narratives and some stories for press around this is what, Bonusly may be doing to raise money for frontline workers in hospitals. This is what this local company is doing to donate food to charity, like I mentioned. Or in Mural's case, here's how they've offered 90 days for free, and they've started a whole webinar series on Suddenly Remote to give knowledge workers and imagination workers a chance to get up to speed if they've never worked remote before. I mean, these are all things that I think they might have been doing in the past, but they hadn't really focused on it as a message, and that's why I think going out with those types of stories at the same time are pretty critical.
Yeah, I think, well, with all of that, there's just a huge change in not that there's a huge change in the value of PR, but PR has become hyper important because the communication that you put out is so important right now, because we're not going to offices, we're not going out to bars, we're not having the normal conversations. Therefore, people are getting their information from these other mediums, and being in front of that. And also, I want to dig back into the anticipation factor and why you need to monitor and watch the trends. You need to anticipate what's going to happen next. Now, within reopening, what is the sentiment? What is the information that's coming out around that? I just talked to a company where they did a study around those that are taking Ubers and Lyfts still, and they did their own survey information, and about 60% said they, from the information they gave me, said that they were actually okay with going out to restaurants again. Now, that's not the national sentiment, and that was in one market, very targeted market, and probably a younger population.
Sure.
But you gotta be thinking about these things. In that trend, that number might change by next week. That's how fast this is moving. So understanding reopening, understanding what the government is telling us, understanding where you can fit the narratives that are, again, sincere to what's going on right now, but also help your brand in some way. Be very careful about that line, but really being sincere and getting out there and actually promoting the things you're doing to help right now is really the consensus thing we need to be getting out of this. And back to the digital marketing piece, I think right now, as far as awareness and brand integrity go, PR, yes, is probably slightly more valuable on that front for sure. Digital marketing, or say, let's just call it advertising or digital ads, search ads right now, people aren't searching the way they used to search, and that data hasn't even really become a reality yet in this short of a time period, in understanding how people are going to actually find things. Now, I will tell you, people are on social media a heck of a lot more, so you might want to look at social media strategies on just branding out there, and your PR works with that. If you get PR wins and what you're doing on those narratives that we just talked about, promoting those within that without the goal of necessarily getting sales up front, but with the goal of maintaining brand integrity, getting followers, and keeping your brand going. So that's my take on that. But Leah, I think we're out of time. Do you have anything else to add?
If anybody is interested in maybe having an introductory conversation, if it's hard for us to offer concrete advice for a specific brand, because I do think that every company is unique, every founder is unique, every story, maybe you don't consider it something that is newsworthy, is probably worth another look. And the best advice I could give is just to have a conversation with an expert, a counselor, a marketer, PR counselor. And happy to do that for anybody that's thinking, I might have something to share, but I'm just not quite sure if this is, sellable. Reach out to us, and we're happy to set up an exploratory conversation for free and give you some advice. Yeah, and I will say, I know we work together in the same firm, but this is evergreen here, and no expectations. We are not here to promote ourselves as part of InfluenceNow. This is definitely a separate entity we're keeping going for marketing and PR conversations. I know, Leah, you threw that out there because I know you're just a helpful person. But if you do have any questions, though, in the meantime, please put them in our chat. Ask us, reach out to us, find us, and please do. Again, I'll remind everybody, we were looking for subscribers, more followers, and we'll keep giving you great content, great information, and helpful things to you. So having said that, we'll talk next week. Thanks. All right, thank you.